Good morning, Manna Church. Ben Goodman here to kick off a new 6-part devotional series entitled Raising Our Game God's Way. I'm really excited about this. In this first installment, I'd like to lay some foundations. When people say they value something, they usually do something to invest in it. People who really want to perform on stage, they'll take lessons. Athletes who really want to win, they will practice. Such investments are necessary and important, but success often requires more than taking actions which express our sincere passions. Those who have a genuine commitment to achieve noble goals are also passionate about discovering and learning what we will call best practices. People who pursue best practices, they just have a commitment to learn, to improve, to mature. They want to really understand the truth about things, even if it's at the expense of some of their own opinions. They're teachable. They want to raise their game. So what does this have to do with us as Christians? Well, if you've ever engaged our growth track, and if you haven't, you should. If you've ever engaged our growth track, you'll find that one of our primary operational principles is this: the church is a force. The church is a force. What does that mean? Briefly, it means this: God has chosen and equipped His people, His church, that would be us, to demonstrate and advance His kingdom, not only in our lives, but also in our families, our workplace, our community, even in our nation and around the world. In other words, we have been chosen and equipped by God to be difference makers in our spheres of influence. He has chosen and equipped us to be difference makers in our land. Nowadays, being difference makers in our land is no easy mission. Our land is increasingly challenged and influenced by the kingdom of darkness. Disease, fear, injustice, deception, manipulation, intimidation, confusion, suspicion, factions, division, hatred, violence, and destruction. The list goes on. The marks of the enemy are obvious. Our land needs healing. In the face of all this, what should we do? Now, the wisdom of man often says, well, rise up and just do something. But make sure that when you act, be sincere, be passionate, be authentic. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, not at all. God often uses our well-intentioned efforts. But while the wisdom of man might be a signal of a virtuous heart, it may not always be effective. More importantly, it may be a distraction from certain best practices. The wisdom of man sometimes produces Facebook rants. Pressure to take sides, pressure to accuse, pressure to criticize and condemn. It may even produce pressure to fearfully avoid being canceled. These kinds of results are not likely to help heal our land. What should we do is an important question. But there is another more important question. What does God think we should do? This question is important because God Himself says that His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. Indeed, God Himself says His ways, His thoughts, His wisdom are way better than, immeasurably superior to man's wisdom. So here we are. What does God want us to do? When it comes to healing our land, what are God's best practices? One that readily comes to mind can be found in 2 Chronicles 7:14. Perhaps you're familiar with it. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. And I will heal their land. That's a powerful promise, and God doesn't lie. 2 Chronicles 7:14 is one of God's foundational best practices, one that's especially relevant to us right now in these challenging times. In the next 5 sessions, please join me. We'll break down this verse in very practical ways. We'll do this so that each of us can grow in one of God's best practices. Let's learn together how to raise our game God's way. See you tomorrow.